Our next speaker is Bumi Balogun. Bumi Balogun will be taking us today on COVID-19, policy and governance implications for human resources leaders. So we'll just run through a profile on Bumi. Bumi Balogun has over 20 years consummate expertise in global financial markets as a treasury management specialist and foreign exchange trader. She is an alumna of University of Lagos, holds an MBA from the University of Nottingham, and an LLM International Corporate Governance, Financial Regulation and Economic Law from the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, University of London. With a keen interest in transformational leadership, policy and governance, Bumi obtained a master's in public administration from the Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University, and is currently engaged as a senior policy advisor in the United Kingdom. She is also a fellow of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants and member of the Association of Corporate Treasurers. Bumi is passionate about individuals maximizing potential and speaks and mentors via her Destiny Masterclass training series. Wow. With a round of applause, let us please welcome Bumi Balogun. You're welcome. Hi, Bumi.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Excellent. You are very, very clear. We can hear you so well.
Okay, good. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. It is a pleasure to be here with you. This is a very pertinent topic, and there is no better time to be talking about policy and governance implications for HR leaders. For all leaders, but HR leaders in particular, because I think at one of the speakers, I think it was Oyebola, who rightly talked about the role of HR in holding the hand of leadership and working with leadership as they walk through this very, very difficult time. So let's go into it. We are in a VUCA environment, and that simply means it's volatile, it's uncertain, complex, and there is a lot of ambiguity. That concept originated from the US War College, and they used it to describe the situation after the Cold War. I mean, beyond World War II and the Great Depression, I don't think we have quite seen anything like COVID. And it is still unfolding. I mean, I don't need to tell you, we see the headlines daily on how it is affecting economies worldwide. And it is still unfolding because there's still the threat of a second wave, a lot of vaccination trials ongoing. We pray to God that, they do work. But the key thing about COVID and what it has, shown is the fact that as business owners, as leaders, as governments, we did not quite understand the interconnectedness of the systems that we are in. When we had the 2008 financial crisis, it was just the financial markets that shook. But to date, every man-made system has been affected by COVID. What does that tell us? Systems thinking is critical in the era in which we find ourselves. Is COVID really a surprise? The answer is no. Since 2016, there have been signs that, there is a readjustment coming. I mean, there was already talk about, the risk of having China as the supply capital of the world. And then you find out that what COVID has also done is it amplified existing socioeconomic fault lines of inequality. So here in the UK, where I am based, you find people of a certain ethnicity being affected more by COVID. And you see the same thing in America as well. So we don't know the extent of this economic fallout. So this VUCA environment is going to be with us for quite some time to come. I was tempted to put post-COVID in the title, but then I thought, that is playing a chance because nobody really knows how this is going to pan out. But we do hope that, it works out well, for everyone. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about big themes today rather than getting into granular details. I'm going to share this slide very quickly. In fact, I thought about, not putting it up, but it is in the public domain. So when COVID struck, somebody leaked this document, and this is from the UK National Security Risk Assessment 2019. If you do have time, Google it and read it. It called exactly what is happening. It predicted that there will be 65,000 deaths, but we have 41,000. It said that the cost to the UK economy will be 2.35. I mean, just this week, we were told that for the first time in the UK, public debt has clocked 2 trillion. Never happened. But you can understand why people were unprepared. It was seen as a black swan event. It's low probability. Yes, it's high impact, but it's very unlikely something like this could happen.
To interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you, Ms. Balogo. Your slides are not up. Could you share your slides, please? Your slides are not up. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize I hadn't shared that. I will do that straight away. So, are the slides, are they visible now?
Could you put it on SlideShare so that
yes, it is. It is on SlideShare. I am sharing the screen now. Yeah.
Okay, no, but I'm saying, could you put it on the SlideShare?
Oh, okay. Sorry about SlideShare. Yeah. Yep. Sorry about that. Okay, so let me just quickly rewind. So that was the VUCA environment that I was talking about. And thanks for pointing that out. I believe that was Emma. And this is the security assessment report that I was talking about. So this report actually called everything that occurred. And you imagine that, so why, was the government on a back foot? And like I was saying, because people thought that this was a black swan event, low probability, high impact, unlikely to happen. And this emphasizes the point I made earlier, that people think that, oh, well, this is, one of those events that would not happen, and the lack of understanding of the interconnectedness of our systems. And we need to realize that our world is getting increasingly complex. So we're talking about Internet of Things. We're also talking about 5G. We're talking about quantum physics and all of that. So it is imperative as we go forward that we really begin to update the skills and knowledge and understand how all the systems that we have created as we get into more complexity, interrelate and how they will affect us as businesses. So the next slide here is what World Economic Forum has tried to do in terms of trying to make these connections for us. And I would recommend this as well. It is very fascinating to look at it. And I can just imagine the amount of work that has gone into looking at this and into pulling it together. So the world in which we live in requires that we understand how things affect each other. So for example, if I am the governor of a state, and then I decide that I want to impose a lockdown, I should understand the ramifications for every sector. I should understand that some people gain, their salaries, their livelihood is on a daily basis, and we see that because of the lack of interconnectedness, there was no collaboration and there was no coordinating in trying to tackle COVID. A policy is taken, a decision is made, and then suddenly you realize that, well, actually, it has impacted this other system. And that is what the World Economic Forum is trying to get us to do and make us understand that, look, going forward, there is a place for leaders to truly understand, the systems and the complexity of the world that we find ourselves in. So the other thing I want to mention is everything that has been the consequence of COVID is not really new. It has only accelerated the trends. We're talking about stakeholder capitalism. Most people might not be familiar with that, but would understand sustainable business. There's been, clarion calls for business to be more sustainable in the way in which they operate. We're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. That is what we have upon us right now. And you can see that, look, we've been talking about this 3, 4, 5 years ago. deglobalization. I mentioned people had already been talking about China being the supply capital of the world. E-commerce. I mean, everybody's online these days. I can't remember the last time I walked into a shop to buy anything. Every of my purchase is done online. And the future of work. People have already started working from home. I know people here who have a permanent work from home contract. So what we find is that, the consequences, they're not really new. It's just acceleration of trends. So when COVID came upon us, what we realized is that the companies that were on the first foot, the companies that had seen these trends and had taken a position were the ones that were able to adapt and react very quickly and were able to do better than most other companies. So what does it mean going forward? As we look at the acceleration of the trends and we look at things that are upcoming, how do we as leaders position ourselves, position our companies to be able to be on the front foot? Because we're certainly in uncertain times and we do not really know how long this is going to pan out. So that's something I would like to call to mind. So straight away we go to stakeholder capitalism. For those of us who studied economics, the mantra is the purpose of business is to maximize, the shareholder value. Well, that mantra is fading right now. So what happened during the financial crisis? The government bailed out banks, yep. And then I remember then people used to say they were embarrassed to say they were bankers because it was like, you guys did not have a hold of your industry and you kind of threw all of us, into economic woes. But with COVID, if I take the UK where I live, the government is currently paying the salary, well, up to 80% to a maximum of £2,500 for 9.6 million people. This 9.6 million people work for 1.2 million companies. Remember, this is taxpayers. These are taxpayers' funds. It is estimated that by the end of October, I believe, when that scheme comes to an end, the government would have spent £80 billion. So that means that people are now asking more of companies. What exactly is the purpose of a company? I anticipate that with public debt at 2 trillion, at some point, my chancellor is going to have to up taxation because we bailed out companies. So people are beginning to question companies and ask companies that, what exactly is your role in society? The quote I've put up there is by Larry Fink, and Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock. BlackRock is the largest investment company in the world. They currently have under management about $6 trillion. So when he says something, you had better listen. And this is a quote from a letter to CEOs last year. And the key part is what I've underlined, and I'll read that sentence. He says it continues to accelerate, that millennials, who represent 35% of the workforce, will express new expectations of the companies they work for, buy from, and invest in. And that's what I'm saying. So sustainable business, purposeful business. Academia is at the forefront of pushing this idea that it has to be value for all and not just value for the owners of the business. Those of us who are a bit older, we remember Michael Porter, 5 Forces. Michael Porter was one of the proponents, who gave a lot of emphasis to shareholder capitalism. He's also talking about shared values in companies. And you find that in the governance space, people are beginning to talk about environmental, social, and governance performance metrics. So when I look at your company, I just don't want to see how much money you're making. I don't want to see your financial report only. How are you helping us, sustain the environment? What are you contributing to the social community in which you find yourself? And in governing your company, how do you treat your employees? How do you treat your suppliers? How do you treat your stakeholders and the organizations and people in your ecosystem? So this might seem a bit far-fetched, but remember when I started and I said COVID only accelerated trend. This is another trend. So the onus is on business owners to begin to see how they're going to wrap all of this into their businesses and, really put this into the long-term planning. And that takes us straight away to corporate governance. What is corporate governance? It's very simple. It's just a system of rules, practices, and processes by which your company is directed or controlled. One thing I really want to say here is when people hear corporate governance, what quickly comes to mind is board meetings, company secretaries, and audit committee, and all of that. And you can see clearly from this diagram that that is just one aspect. It encompasses everything that you do to ensure that your mission, your vision, your objectives are actualized. And most times when companies fail, it is because they do not have a proper governance system. It's because things are just done in an ad hoc manner. So what I'm going to do now is talk about all of this. I'll just go back to the slides, have a look at it. I'm going to group all of these elements into 3 broad themes. And I think this is where I'll spend most of the time. So the first thing is establishing your strategic direction. Everybody says this is a global reset. This is an opportunity for businesses to redefine their vision, their mission, and their objectives. So this is a time for your board. This is a time for the management to sit down and start thinking about those things. You probably think, oh, why am I mentioning this? This is the HR leaders. But the HR leaders are known now as the chief crisis officers in COVID. And I think someone referenced it before that the role of the HR personnel now is akin to what CFOs were doing during the financial crisis. HR has got the front, they've got the front seat now. This is your opportunity to push through all the, latest thinking and latest practices that management had hitherto, resisted. This is the opportunity for HR to really define and help their companies to create a positive corporate culture. So in establishing strategic direction, I would expect that in a VUCA environment, leadership is meeting more regularly. If you read the big companies, they're meeting daily, they're talking to themselves. And it's what exactly is our mission? What is our value proposition? What is your corporate culture like? Do you have an open culture? Do you allow people to speak? Because if you do not have this, you cannot innovate. And one thing I like to say to leaders at this time is, you cannot have linear thinking. You must be humble, be ready to listen. There's no precedent for the problem that we have currently. You must allow diversity on the board. In countries like Germany, they actually give seats on the board to stakeholders. They have employees on the board, and they also have suppliers, community on the board in some of the companies, just to ensure that there's a 360 perspective as you think about your company and establish the strategic direction. And HR plays a key role here. So your ECG metrics, we've talked about that. And we see that, this is not far-fetched. During COVID, we've seen many companies rise up. In Nigeria, we've seen a lot of companies donate isolation centers. We've seen many people give COVID packages, to people. So governance, social, and your environmental metric. I think it's the environmental where I would say that, things are not really as far along in the emerging world as it is in the West here. Your leadership succession. COVID is no respecter of race or class. Sadly, we have lost a lot of people. What does that mean for your company? That means beyond the sea level, you should be looking further downwards into the pipe to make sure that there's a pipeline of succession and your resilience as a company. Before now, we've seen a lot of bonuses, we've seen a lot of share buybacks by companies, and I think that era is gone. Executive pay, executive bonuses is surely going to be a conversation that will come up, because when the chancellor writes and says that I have to pay more tax, and I know that my funds went to propping up companies, I certainly would be unhappy at seeing it being business as usual with excessive and, salaries, bonuses, and, things that, really do not chime with the mood in which the world finds itself. So it's all about the reputation of the company. And HR has a strategic role working with management to be able to see these things through. The next grouping is executing your strategy and managing your risks. Every company has now become a tech enterprise. Every company now has to go digital. What does that mean for your governance system? Like I said, those who are already embedding, the future of work into their governance systems were at a front foot. So they were able to adapt quickly. So I can imagine that if you never had employees working from home, how did they get remote access to systems? I was speaking to a friend yesterday who is based in Nigeria, and she said, well, I can't work from home because everything I need, my filing and all of that is in the office. And I chuckled and I said, wow, but these were trends that were, already being seen. Innovation, you have to empower your people to speak up. Your organizational structure, because the system is so complex, there's ambiguity, there's uncertainty, you must decentralize. This is a time to have flatter organizational structures. If you're going to be making rapid decisions, you need to decentralize your authority and you need to give everybody a voice at the table. In fact, this is the time where you should have cross-functional teams. Otherwise, what you're going to have is groupthink, because the same set of people who've been treating the same set of problems have a linear way of thinking. But remember, we're saying systems thinking. So sometimes maybe when HR is having the meeting, you should add some of your stakeholders, because you'll be surprised that they bring a totally different perspective to the meeting. In my role as a policy advisor, I certainly see this. We always have diverse stakeholders around the table because there will be a perspective you don't miss just because of your training and because of the kind of roles and work that you've done prior. You need to be agile, you need to be adaptable. Agile means you need to be able to move quickly, and adapt means you need to be able to change processes and procedures. Then we talk about strategic partnerships. What are the strategic partnerships? Who are your suppliers? We've seen how the supply chain has been broken. In the governance system and the business ecosystem going forward, what you may need to do is invest in some of your suppliers. This might be the time to drop your popular suppliers and look for someone who is equally as good and maybe not as popular, and invest in their infrastructure, so that next time there's a problem, next time there's a breakdown in the supply chain, you're sure that they're going to be there for you. Data and analytics, this is key. In a fast decision-making environment, that is what you need, real-time, online, to be able to make decisions. And I cannot emphasize this enough. You need to keep data and you need to keep analytics. We've all become tech companies. Cybersecurity is important. Yes, everybody's moving rapidly, trying to make sure that people can collaborate and work, but have you taken a step back in managing the risk that comes with that? Your cyber security. That is something that is really high up there. In fact, research has shown that since COVID started, we've seen an increase in the malicious emails that are being sent out. Health and safety. This is no longer the traditional health and safety. The most important thing now is the mental well-being of staff. And that is very strategic, because your staff are your key resource at the moment. Do you have mental health first aiders in your company? Do you have an employment assistance program that even extends beyond your staff to their family? Do you have counseling programs available? Because beyond the office, there is a lot of uncertainty in the system. And trust me, a lot of people here are depressed. There's a high level of anxiety. People don't know whether their jobs are secure. So you need to make sure that your staff are in the right frame of mind to deliver your business. Competency gaps. Definitely switching abruptly to being a digital company, you will find that there will be gaps that need to be filled. Business models have changed rapidly. So you have to look at what you need to get in, the training you need to get into the company to make sure that you upskill your staff accordingly. Then I talk about the risk dashboard. I don't talk about a register, because what happens most times is people do a register and they just file it away. But in a VUCA environment, you need a dashboard. That's real-time online information that would ensure that you're making the right decisions at all times. And then ensuring compliance. Right now, every policy, most policies, let me put it that way, have been thrown out of the window because we're new territory. So that means new policies need to be written. There's remote working. How do you onboard a new person? When you onboard that person and the person is at home, how are you going to make sure that they imbibe your organizational structure? For those who've never managed people working at home, how do you train people to be able to manage and appraise staff that they've never seen? In the role I'm working on, I onboarded somebody in April. I'm yet to see him, and it's unlikely I will see him before we finish this task. And I tell you, it is a struggle to manage and appraise somebody that way. So how do we upskill our people to be able to do that? Collaborative tools. Not everybody's, tech friendly. How are you ensuring that you have the right tools and training for your people? And then communication. Communicate. Because of the uncertainty in the system, you should even be over communicating with your staff. We already talked about talent development. What policies are you going to put in place? Everything is online. Who are you going to be working with? Your employee well-being, we've spoken about that. So those are the things that HR should be thinking about as we progress in the VUCA environment. Most people seem to be a bit relaxed because we've gone past the emergency and the crisis stage, but this is just a lull. There's still the threat of the second wave. What happens if the second wave is thrust upon us? And that's when I come to institutionalize your learning. So everything that has happened in the crisis stage, everything that you have done, your decision making, a good organization would actually have been documenting all this. And what do you do with the document? What do you do with that learning? What you do with the learning is that you look at what has worked, you look at what you tweaked, and you look at how you embed it in your institution. Remember, there's no precedent. There is no how it has been done before. You are creating your own trend, even as you look at the wider landscape and you look at the wider business environment. So I'll quickly talk about the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance. This was released, I believe, last year by the Financial Reporting Council. I've had a quick look at it. There are 28 key principles, and it looks at those key ideas and elements. And they released a guidance this year, and that says that from January, companies will be required to include in your annual reports a clear information on your governance structures, your policies and practices, as well as environmental and social risks and opportunities. So we see ESG coming up again. So that's something that I really would want companies, leaders, HR personnel to really have a firm view on. As we go through the crisis, the stability stage, do not lose sight of the long term. It is those companies that have taken this trend and are on the front foot that will be the ones who can evolve faster and innovate for the future and be best placed among competition. And the other thing I would say in closing is corporate governance is really important. And I think that people are really beginning to see that. When leaders fail, obviously, if you have the right objective and vision and mission in the first place, it is more often because there is no governance structure. So this is really important. If you do not have a corporate governance framework properly embedded into your institution, that is just a strategy for failure. I think that's just a blunt way to put it. So going forward, we should ensure that we take cognizance of these trends. The future of work, the fourth industrial revolution, there's still a lot to be unpacked there. And then we should also look at the environmental, the social and governance elements, even as people begin to ask more of companies because of how much money the government has pumped into propping them up. Yep, I think I'm just about on time. And like I said, those are just big themes that I wanted to share. And I think people can actually follow up and read this you know, for further interest. It certainly is interesting times, and I'd like to see how the landscape pans out. So thank you very much. And that's me done. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bumi. That was an excellent presentation, very easy to understand. I remember that we were sort of debating a bit whether this was a relevant topic. And honestly, thank God you came on board, because you just really hit the nail on the head. And not just for HR leaders, but also for all leaders across, you know, the various spheres of the economy. We have a lot to learn. Thank you. You shed a lot of light on how we need to be nimble. Leaders now have to be nimble. They need to be agile, incorporate so many people on board. Look at your IT technology. HR also needs to understand that it's beyond regular HR right now. We are now the chief crisis officers, and we are donning so many hats. Thank you so, so much. Guys, please give her a round of applause.